Chapter 416. The wine cup shattered in his hand, but Tianbang did not come back to his senses. He was still daydreaming. Shards of the wine cup shot out, but there was no wound on his hand. Only some of the wine and shards slid down his arm and into his cuffs. His waterproof sweater covered it, so it was impossible to see. However, once he changed his posture, he would not feel good at all. Major General Tian. Zhu Ling tried to warn him, but Tianbang maintained a fixed posture for the next 5 seconds. The wine seeped out from his sleeves at his elbow and opened up on his pants. Cat Eyes looked pensive. She asked Zhu Ling, "You mentioned fragrant bait number 4 just now. What is that?" Papercut sent a cupped fist emoticon over at the mission window. "Many thanks for your help in asking." Zhu Ling hesitated for a moment before replying, "It is bait specifically used to attract the human-faced arachnid. It is also a target that can tempt the human-faced arachnid to kill. Since it is number 4, then there must be number 1, 2, 3 or 5, 6, 7. There aren't that many. We only prepared 4 conventional baits." It was unknown when Tianbang regained his senses, but he personally answered Cat Eye's question. He extended his hand and pointed at his chest. "This is number 1. Number 2 is my assistant. Number 3 is a mentally enhanced ability user hired by the military. Number 4 is a bit special. It is a mutant carrier occupied by the human-faced arachnid." Then the first one was finished. The preset destruction incantation didn't seem to have any effect. Cat Eyes raised her eyebrows. He wasn't hurt? It was useless. As he spoke, Tianbang finally saw that only a bit of the glass handle remained on his fingertips. He tossed it away and swung his hand, flinging a pile of shards from his sleeves onto the ground. Tianbang shot a glance at Zhu Ling after he finished this action. Zhu Ling thought that Tianbang was about to give an order, so he instinctively stood at attention. However, Tianbang did not speak again. He just pulled out a wet wipe from the paper box on the coffee table and slowly wiped his hands. His perpetual smile was somehow paired with a wrinkled brow. His entire appearance was deformed. At this moment, Tianbang no longer had the feeling of a young man. Zhu Ling shut his mouth and maintained his silence. Cat Eyes observed the man who called himself Frank with interest. She even asked, "How does it feel to fight against the human-faced arachnid? Do you need help?" "It's much smarter than the intelligence reports, or perhaps its instincts are stronger." Tianbang's smile quickly returned to normal. "But its gaming level is terrible and it gave up flash very early. The only problem is that it doesn't look like it has a cooldown." Cat Eyes could be considered a gaming expert. She easily deciphered. He directly teleported away. "He didn't catch the tail?" Tianbang shook his head. "Polar domain, abyss region, deep zone, middle zone. Especially the last 2 regions, we couldn't capture its movement trajectory. Even in the shallow zone, the feeling is very strange." "What kind of strange method?" "In the empty room, playing hide and seek with you." "That's it? Hey, it escaped?" "I don't know." Tianbang threw the wet towel up and let it fall freely. He got up and walked out. Cat Eyes pushed her sunglasses up to her forehead and followed him without a trace of politeness. Very soon the group arrived at the frontline command center. At this time, more than half of the technical staff in the center were gathered in front of the radar data display screen and discussing. It seemed that it was difficult to reach a consensus. The data was still the same data. He couldn't understand it. At the mission window, Papercut took out the good habit of asking questions when he didn't understand. He consulted someone who knew the ropes. "Secretary He, what are they so conflicted about?" "The conditions are incomplete." He Yuan responded and then gave a simple explanation. There weren't many methods to deal with Darksider life forms with the current detection technology. No matter how advanced the equipment was, it was very difficult to discover and lock onto a Darksider life form in time. They could only rely on methods like the shadow mist to distinguish the human-faced arachnid's interference with the material plane. It absorbed various waveforms and indirectly determined the probabilities. Since it was a matter of probability, there was nothing wrong with obtaining more effective data. If the combat forces arranged around the building weren't able to eliminate the human-faced arachnid in the first instance, then they would force the human-faced arachnid closer to the material plane. This would cause it to reveal more and more characteristics and details. This would serve as a reference for subsequent calculations. But for some unknown reason, the human-faced arachnid had never given any continuous set of data. This meant that it was always leaping and advancing without any pattern to speak of. He Yuan gave a simple explanation while Tianbang communicated with the center's chief technician about the specific perception of the mental plane just now. It's clearly in the shallow zone. My mental smoke has locked onto it, but it can always disappear and reappear with ease. It's like a flash, teleportation and other such skills. No. Don't be misled by my description. What I mean is, it's like a flat space. There are invisible folds that the arachnid can perceive and utilize at any time. These folds provide cover for the arachnid. Do you understand what I mean? It was clear that the chief technician's comprehension ability in this area was far inferior to his attainments in numbers. At the mission window, Papercut felt that Tianbang's perceptual description was more intuitive. He strove to understand the feeling, but it was unclear. Damn, it's a mental strengthened one. What does this mean? It means that this human-faced arachnid has grasped a deeper mystery on the mental plane at the same depth. It utilizes some sort of terrain on the mental plane to obtain inconceivable results. He Yuan stated calmly, after all, we know nothing about what the world looks like in the eyes of a darksider life form. The same logic can be used to prove that the world is distorted beyond recognition in the eyes of some monsters. Cat Eyes also spoke in the mission window, seemingly pointing at something. Papercut had never been interested in mystical things. He found it strange that Luo Nan, who had always been highly sensitive to such topics, hadn't said anything yet. Nanster, did you fall asleep? No. Luo Nan simply responded with a single word, but his consciousness was climbing within the distorted world. Under his command, the Wraith Sign's long limbs moved noiselessly, moving from one curtain to another curtain. His clairvoyance towards the mental plane was indeed different from other ability users. After experiencing and comprehending the logic world and the telescope, the two structural forms of soul strength and their different functions, he had a completely new train of thought on how to utilize this special clairvoyance. Luo Nan had previously used the human-faced arachnid's individual distortion towards the mental plane to pull the curtain and weave a simple labyrinth at the last minute. This caused Tianbang, who was used to being straightforward, to be bewildered by this little smokescreen. Luo Nan never strayed far. After he made Tianbang dizzy, he wandered around Aurora Cloud City. If he wanted to take the Wraith Sign away and erase all future troubles, he needed to have both Tianbang and the Blood Flame Order reveal their hidden trump cards. The faintly discernible human-faced arachnid, the obscure and unclear ownership, and the erratic location. These three things combined together were undoubtedly the most ideal state for him. Chapter 417. From Luo Nan's ears, the incantation sound was weak and oppressive. It was like a whisper, but it continued on without end. It was like an undercurrent of a mountain stream. It flowed downwards and guided the mind. Unwittingly, the mind seeped through the layers of earth and rock to another location. Blood flames surged and rocks rose. Luo Nan's mind arrived at a rather familiar location. This was the interior of the Wraith Sign, the structure of the Blood Soul Temple. The incantation sound surrounded the mountain-like Blood Soul Temple. It came and went in an ethereal manner. Although it was low, the Blood Soul Temple was relatively stable in its structure wherever it passed. The restlessness of energy could be seen. It was very different from usual. Correspondingly, the Wraith Sign was affected a bit. Its claws rubbed and hissed. This was the first time Luo Nan felt the reverse effect of the Blood Soul Temple on the human-faced arachnid. All right, the Blood Flame Order had finally made their move. But then he felt that something was wrong. Although the direction was a bit erratic, wasn't the feedback coming and going a bit too frequent? Seemed to be very close. Luo Nan's thoughts stirred and the Wraith Sign sank into the void. It jumped and switched between the tall buildings of Cloud City Water Village. On the more fundamental mental plane, thousands of curtains warped. The starry sky was dazzling. The long claws of the Wraith Sign moved back and forth between groups of constellations, probing and filtering one by one. The dense stream of people continued to follow their own plans and moods. They wandered back and forth in the large living area. They were completely unaware of the situation outside of their understanding and perception. The temporary mission window jumped once more at this time. Papercut had seen the tense atmosphere of the command center for a long time. He had to revise his judgment and view. This human-faced arachnid seems to be very troublesome. He Yuan expressed her affirmation. It is indeed so. According to the intelligence, This human-faced arachnid has likely swallowed a large amount of its own kind. Its instincts have been greatly strengthened, and its sensitivity to danger and reaction speed have increased. Perhaps it is already very close to becoming a complete body. So it's like this. Cat eyes suddenly cut to the chase. Where did you get your intelligence from? He Yuan responded, supposedly it's from within the Blood Flame Order. A traitor? A traitor was inevitable. Luo Nan and the Wraith Sign had already pushed away a large amount of dense fog. The fog was clear and bright. There was only the corrosive smoke of the Wraith Sign. It slowly permeated and locked onto the target. 80 kilometers away, Luo Nan closed his eyes. His eyebrows jumped. Who was this guy? At this very moment, Luo Nan's location formed a line with the large living area. And with the latter as the end point, a vertical line extended out in a northwest direction. The distance was approximately 30 kilometers. This was a stress sports gym located in the River Wu district. This gym specialized in serving high-end crowds. The core members of the Blood Flame Order were gathered here. In the private room, 5 figures could be seen, but there was one person who was not visible. Mo Luan, the most senior elder of the order, was not in a good mood. The pressure was like an invisible dark cloud that covered the entire room. Yin Lu stood with her head lowered. She was extremely depressed and didn't speak or move. Meng Chong and Wu Kuei were about the same. Meng Chong stood there with his arms crossed, his face expressionless. Wu Kuei was in the corner silent. Jiang Yuanzhen, who was more active, was pacing back and forth in the room, restless. The light from the projection shone down, displaying a bird's-eye view of Cloud City Water Village. The angle was very good. With Aurora Cloud Capital as the center, the 7 skyscrapers were all included, but that was all. They practically knew nothing about the enemy's arrangements in this area. Mrs. Halder wore a black dress. She sat upright in front of the projection. Light flooded over her body and streaked across her dignified snow-white face. Her face was expressionless from beginning to end. Only when Jiang Yuanzhen couldn't help but speak did she stop in front of her and ask in a deep voice. Rin Hong still hasn't arrived? Jiang Yuanzhen responded, he's quite far away. He just said that he would arrive soon. What about the purchased information? A moment later, Wu Kuei, who was in charge of the information, answered, it's done. In the next moment, a series of red and blue dots of light appeared on the projection. Compared to the recorded image, it was rather crude, but it was worth nearly 10 million. Mrs. Halder didn't say anything else. She tilted her head slightly to look at the projection. The 10 million level of real-time information wasn't too detailed, but it could at least give her a general understanding of the situation. Mo Luan had the same thoughts as her. He opened his mouth for the first time to decipher the information. The deep blue walkers have moved out. Looking at their distribution, they're sparse but not dense. They're shifting frequently. This is a search formation. They're expanding the range of the format of fire to the greatest limit. With the instincts of the mold, the possibility of bypassing this dangerous area is very small. Then why aren't you going to save them? Jiang Yuanzhen stomped her feet anxiously. It looks okay. Mrs. Halder's lips hooked up. It's impossible to deal fatal damage to the mold in this sort of situation. The other side is rather polite. At the very least, it's a bit different from the previous human-faced arachnids. Do they want to capture it alive? Mo Luan's thoughts sank even deeper. The possibility is very high. Mrs. Halder shook her head slightly. In that case, Rin Hong is a traitor. As soon as these words were spoken, the entire room suddenly sank into an icy cold cave. The other people's minds were relatively deep. Their expressions were always restrained. Only Jiang Yuanzhen was truly dumbstruck. A second later, his entire body jumped up. Preposterous. Jiang Yuanzhen's lips were trembling. Rin Hong is a priest. He's nothing if he leaves the order. He's not an idiot. This sort of judgment is too hasty. Mrs. Halder turned her face over. She no longer looked at the projection. Her calm and ice-cold gaze looked straight at Jiang Yuanzhen. From the current information, is the military targeting the human-faced arachnid or the order? The order. In that case, the human-faced arachnid is just an excuse. It doesn't matter if they capture it or kill it. But why are they still entrenched in Cloud City Water Village? Why are they spending so much effort to play hide-and-seek with the human-faced arachnid? Because it might be because they want to find evidence. If you wish to incriminate someone, you can always find a pretext. Whether it's the Order or the Castle Consortium, they aren't pure little white sheep. The relevant files are in the hands of the government and the military. They can fill up a cabinet at the very least. Why do they need to seek a faraway solution? Then, from our standpoint, we can only consider this. The human-faced arachnid is useful to them. The mold is useful to them. The Blood Soul Temple is useful to them. Then tell me, old Jiang, what kind of people is the Blood Soul Temple most useful to? Jiang Yuanzhen was stupefied. He didn't respond. Instead, Yin Lu spoke in a hoarse voice, the Blood Flame lineage. Yes. The Blood Flame lineage needs the Blood Soul Temple. And the Blood Flame lineage will more or less contact the military. Am I right? Jiang Yuanzhen's sweat poured down like rain. The expressions of the others weren't any better. The special doctrine of the Blood Flame Order determined that they would rise on the battlefield and fall in peace. For this reason, the Order's hidden power within the military had always been relatively strong. The Orthodox branch of Xia City was able to participate in the Frost River Reality Project with the identity of a declining order. They were even able to dispatch management personnel. This explained a few problems. However, a divided order also divided its corresponding network of people. If this branch could have hidden power within the military, then the other branches could do the same. After all, for the Blood Flame lineage, this was the strongest and most direct source of power. This perfectly explains Ren Hong's defection. He is nothing after leaving the order. But the current situation is that he hasn't left the order. He has just jumped from one branch to another. Moreover, there is one thing that we are unable to give him, but it is also a serious hindrance to him. Chapter 418. So it was Ren Hong. Luo Nan never thought that the answer would come so easily. Any suspicions of bait, a traitor and the like were instantly swept away. But the unexpected had to be unexpected. Luo Nan didn't really understand Ren Hong. He just knew that he was a true big shot in the business of the Blood Flame Order. He was much stronger than Yin Lu, who was distracted by other things. Among the priests of the order, his importance was second only to Lady Halder. Many times he acted as the substitute priest. How could such an important person betray just like that? Several deep blue walkers took up a defensive formation, surrounding Ren Hong within. They were tightly protected, and this directly proved this person's position. Ren Hong was at the center of the formation. He pressed his palm against the ground and muttered an incantation. Since this was the lowest level of the underground parking lot, there was thick soil beneath the cement floor. Ren Hong used it as a channel to continuously absorb energy. He formed a nearly substantial incantation to bless his body. A low rumbling sound was heard. Someone was contacting him. Coincidentally, Luo Nan sensed the two fulcrum points on the other side of the call. Tianbang was on the other side. He was in the command center. In front of everyone, he spoke softly, "How is it?" The image displayed on the central hologram was the real-time situation of the underground parking lot. Several deep blue walkers wore protective visors, but Ren Hong only wore priest robes. He didn't have anything covering him. Cat Eyes pushed aside the messy hair in front of her eyes and clicked her tongue. Ren Hong was a big shot in Xia City. Of course she recognized him. Ren Hong also noticed that Tianbang used the public channel to contact him. His expression was very ugly. But since he had done something, he had to bear the corresponding consequences. In the end, he simply lowered his eyes and focused on the leaping spiritual light on the ground. There's already a reaction. The mold is still nearby. It views us as prey. It's greedier and more powerful than we imagined. This means that its basic qualities are extremely good. After becoming a sacrificial artifact, we can hold high expectations. Tianbang inquired, "What about the specific location? Can you control it?" Ren Hong didn't even raise his head. "You guys from the restraining faction are all thinking about this sort of thing. You are too. Well, I just want to see the perfect blood flame willpower. I want to verify my life's worth of learning. And that businesswoman will never be able to do it in her entire life." The scene of the public channel was transmitted to the mission window through Cat Eye's shared perspective. An impactful answer. This caused Papercut to only send out a dumbstruck emoji. Then Ren Hong's seemingly unintentional counterattack caused Papercut to be unable to hold back from sending out a voice message. "F***ck these guys. Oh my god. Cat Eyes also sent a message. The Blood Flame Order is so awesome. Do you know about the He clan? Shuelei could only send an I'm confused emoji. Who is this person? What's that Tai Control faction? Papercut kindly introduced Ren Hong's identity to him and said, the Binding Control faction is a branch of the Blood Flame Order. It involves the interpretation of the Blood Flame Order's teachings. It's rather complicated, so I'm not too clear on it. But all you need to know is that the Blood Flame Order of Xia City and this control faction are absolutely mortal enemies. As he spoke, Papercut was puzzled. This bro Tianbang is too direct. Is it really alright to discuss the matters of a secret order in public? He's an active general. He Yuan explained. At the end of the 80s, the Restraint faction had already cooperated deeply with the military and participated in many experimental missions. It's just that their secret rank is very high, but their reputation isn't that prominent. I've had dealings with Tianbang before, but I didn't know that he had such a close relationship with this branch. Then what is this now? He Yuan didn't reply. It was impossible to determine whether this operation was a continuation of the hatred between the Blood Flame Order's factions or a request from the military for in-depth experiments. Or perhaps it was something else. At this time the public channel was on the right track. Tianbang displayed a magnanimous attitude. Right now we must capture the remains of the human-faced arachnid. You're the expert. Everything will be done according to your wishes. Ren Hong sneered. Your words are piled with the stench of burning the bridge after crossing the river. Hey, as a member of the Restraint faction, isn't inviting you to control them the greatest sincerity? I hope so. The conversation between the two continued in a tense and subtle atmosphere. Most of it was due to the influence of the human-faced arachnid. And at this time, the main culprit who exerted this pressure was evaluating the new information. This is one of Tianbang's trump cards. The wraith sign's sharp claws plucked at the stars, touching upon the window to the bottom of the target's heart. It was like playing with a glass ball. The situation is becoming clearer and clearer. We should let the Blood Flame Order enter the battlefield faster. The more hasty the response from both sides, the more advantageous it is for us. It's decided. Luo Nan's eager will lead the wraith sign's actions. The wraith sign circled several more times on the mental plane. It saw an opportunity and suddenly launched. An unobstructed and ruthless aura rose like a hurricane from nowhere. Ren Hong was operating his spell in the underground parking lot, continuing to strengthen his connection with the Blood Soul Temple. Suddenly, an earth-shattering disaster came over there. Found it. Oh no. The wraith sign's killing intent surged in the boundary between the mental and the material, tearing apart the sacred space created by Ren Hong's spell. Ren Hong raised his head fiercely. His eyes, strengthened by the spell, could already see the human-faced arachnid baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. The distance between the two was extremely close, so close that it broke through the bottom line of his mind. Ren Hong looked at the wraith shadow pouncing at him in a daze. He actually lost the ability to react for a time. In the next moment, a blazing white wall of fire rose between him and the human-faced arachnid. It scorched the air and burned through space. The format of fire. The human-faced arachnid suddenly vanished. It was as if Ren Hong had just woken up from a dream. His left hand instantly raised to his chest, pressing down on the irregular stone talisman outside his priest robe. At the same time he shouted loudly, "It's attacking me! Tie it down." In the frontline command center, Tianbang's figure turned from stillness to pounce out. He didn't run towards the main door. Instead he crashed straight into the outer glass curtain wall. As the glass shards splashed and fell, a human figure ran madly along the nearly vertical curtain wall. Whether it was an ability user or a burner, they all loved to take this kind of shortcut in the metropolis. Tianbang no longer had any confidence in the effectiveness of the mental smoke from the confrontation on the mental plane. However, the format of fire should be different. Do you want to follow? Cat Eyes sent Luo Nan a private message once more. Luo Nan didn't respond. Right now the area his consciousness touched was gushing with flames, warping the boundary between the material plane and the mental plane. The 5 deep blue walkers were all experienced warriors. Their reactions were nearly synchronized in the face of this sudden crisis. Their combined attack technique revealed a powerful sense of order. While simultaneously warping the material plane and the mental plane, They also had the ability to shape. They built a firm domain barrier that was both offensive and defensive. It was practically the bane of the chaos-type human-faced arachnid. However, the human-faced arachnid they were facing right now was the Wraith Sign. It was a special existence controlled by Luo Nan's consciousness. Behind the appearance of chaos, there was actually a strict framework of order that supported it. There were layers of depth that were hard to imagine. The Wraith rune climbed on the floating curtain, and like a spider with thin threads, it easily switched the depth of the mental plane. The shallow zone, the middle zone. Then it jumped back to the shallow zone. In this process of going back and forth, the Wraith Sign had already scanned the strict barrier of the format of fire from several dozen different angles. Perhaps it could be described like this. Under the three-dimensional perspective, no matter how tightly the lines were piled up, it was still nothing more than a sheet of paper. The demonic eyes were radiant with color and the 6 colors were bewildering. An incorporeal attack pierced out from the extreme depths of the mental plane. It pierced through the flames as if it was piercing through an illusory bubble. Then came the attack that shocked the soul. Siege Hammer. A deep blue walker froze in a daze. He suddenly sank into unconsciousness, turning into a meaningless steel sculpture. He was no longer able to provide the output of the format of fire. A corner of the curtain of fire warped and shattered in an instant. The high level of order was warped, forcing the other 4 deep blue walkers to readjust the order of their joint attack. But the flaw had already appeared. How difficult would it be to readjust it? The flames of the underground parking lot dimmed quite a bit in an instant. The specter of the human-faced arachnid was already extremely close to the material plane. It flashed within the flames, stepping over the raging flames of the format of fire in a nearly mocking manner. Ah! Fear dominated Rinhong's movements. His left hand, which had been holding the protective stone slip, suddenly increased its strength, crushing the precious object in his palm to pieces. In an instant, a blood-like thickness and blood-colored radiance flowed out from the cracks of his fingers. The surrounding temperature was actually able to suddenly rise another chunk from the high temperature of the format of fire. The skin and flesh of Rinhong's palms and fingers were burned to the point of lacerating. But from his perspective it was still worth it. The air was severely warped, and the distortion was even greater on the mental plane. The high-temperature bloody radiance formed a new and powerful source of interference. The mental curtain that the Wraith Sign had hooked earlier swayed and drifted, causing a deviation in the originally chaotic and orderly structure. It affected the Wraith Sign's instant positioning. Rinhong seized this opportunity. His left hand, which was lacerated with flesh, pressed down. He raised his right hand and formed a seal on his lower abdomen. Then he stomped down heavily with one foot, causing the cement floor to split open with a bang. Leaping spiritual radiance sputtered out from the cracks. It was dyed by the bloody radiance that flowed out from the cracks of his fingers, turning it blood red in an instant. Blood, blood, blood. Fire, fire, fire. The praises of hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people gushed out wrapped in spiritual radiance. Rinhong slowly knelt on the ground. With a pious posture he placed the seals formed by his hands down. His palms stuck to the ground and his waist bent down as if he was performing a great salute. The Wraith Sign was just about to reorganize its attack, but it was stifled. The Blood Soul Temple within buzzed and trembled. It seemed as if the tip of a pen was scratching on the craggy structure of the mountain. It advanced from bottom to top, layer by layer, transforming into runes. The runes were internalized and quickly formed an enormous restraining force. 80 kilometers away, Luo Nan frowned slightly. Some extremely active elements followed the Blood Soul Temple, followed the Wraith Sign, and seeped into the interior of Luo Nan's sealed system. Then it began to grow wildly. Chapter 419. Under the catalysis of Rinhong's spell power, the Blood Soul Temple underwent a reshaping type of growth. Luo Nan did not know the origins of the protective talisman that Rinhong crushed. A large amount of highly condensed spell power was accumulated inside. It was used as a seed, and it utilized a secret technique to absorb large amounts of faith power from the believers of the order through the earth and soil. After being controlled and transformed, the faith power was poured into the Blood Soul Temple in an unending stream. Luo Nan did not understand the specific operating rules, but he could see that the mountain structure of the Blood Soul Temple had become more exquisite and natural. The 4 buildings on top of it grew more magnificent and dignified. As the Blood Soul Temple grew in turmoil, its absorption and devouring of the chaotic power of the Wraith Sign became more and more unbridled. It seemed that the parasitic process of several dozen days was about to come to an end. It was currently fusing the human-faced arachnid's power into its own, attempting to devour it and replace its body. Was it not going to walk the remaining several hundred steps of the path of blood and fire? Or could it be said that Ren Hong's rebellion was because he saw another golden path that could forge a perfect sacrificial artifact without going through the human-faced arachnid? Luo Nan did not know what Ren Hong was thinking. But he did know that the effects of this method on his own closed system were quite obvious. It was so obvious that the other believer could sense it. Cat Eyes took the initiative to contact him. "Hey, is the line disturbed? It's very noisy." "Ignore it." Luo Nan urged the human-faced arachnid to rapidly jump within the two-way warped mental screen, leaving the material plane in an instant. The bodyguard, the deep blue walker, lost his connection to the human-faced arachnid and immediately reported, "Target lost." Tian Bang. "Not yet." Ren Hong's hands firmly clasped the rubble in front of his knees, ensuring the stability of the psychic wave radiation. Sweat trickled down his forehead and cheeks, but a smile had already bloomed on his face. "I've locked onto it." "It's locked onto." Luo Nan also confirmed this point. He had already leapt into the middle zone, and he was far away from all devices and mental senses through the warping effect of the mental screen. However, Ren Hong's incantation magic power continued to pour in through the shepherd's channel. Most importantly, the Blood Soul Temple released the element of blood flame as it absorbed energy endlessly. It attempted to assimilate everything in the surroundings to aid in the digestion. It was like red ink in a pool of water. It was not that easy to dilute. Unexpectedly, the contamination was spreading. The Wraith Sign was very important within Luo Nan's closed system. It occupied the highest position within all of Luo Nan's believers. It was able to make Luo Nan's power more efficient. And through coupling and other exquisite and subtle functional relationships, it was constantly linked with other believers, transforming into an enormous production line. It produced an unending stream of soul strength, providing abundant supplies for Luo Nan. At this time, one link of the production line was contaminated. In theory, it was possible that the entire production line would be affected. While in theory, Luo Nan's mentality was very stable. At this moment he could see the benefits of seclusion at home last weekend. He already had a relatively clear understanding of the entire formatting theory system. He was using a transcendent perspective to assess the situation. This was because Luo Nan's status in this system was that of a factory owner. In other words, the analogy of pool and red ink was also very appropriate. In an interconnected pool system, the red ink in the upstream pool would pollute the downstream pool, but no matter what, it would be very difficult to go upstream and pollute the source. Luo Nan was the source of the pool system. He was the factory owner who could shut down the production line at any time. Within the closed system he built, this determined the difference between a superior and an inferior position. It determined the absolute control that Luo Nan enjoyed. Even though the power of the Blood Soul Temple followed the internal connections of the closed system and spread endlessly, it was unable to corrode Luo Nan himself no matter what. As for Luo Nan, what he needed to do was very simple. He pressed down with a clear and distinct will, directly severing the coupling connection between the Wraith Sign and the other believers. He made the Wraith Sign independent. The expansion momentum of the Blood Soul Temple's power was easily severed. It was locked within the Wraith Sign's main body area, erasing the last bit of theoretical possibility. The Blood Soul Temple was still engulfing and assimilating the Wraith Sign. Under Ren Hong's full power, the momentum was quite fierce. However, this vice ablatum of the Blood Flame Order never realized from beginning to end that the Blood Soul Temple, which he had entrusted his heart's blood and sweat, had already suffered a crushing defeat on a certain level. This was the isolation of the system, the suppression of the hierarchy. When the Wraith Sign occupied the Magpie's Nest, it silently seized the embryonic state of the Blood Soul Temple. This was the result that was destined. Even if the mountain was towering and lofty, how could it compare to the heavens? Right now the only problem left was the Wraith Sign. The Blood Soul Temple's erosion of the Wraith Sign continued. It was like retribution for the Wraith Sign taking over the mold's nest. Of course Luonan had to control this, but now was not the time. The restless Blood Soul Temple was the real bait. Although Rin Hong's methods were quite effective, the turbulence created on the level of the Blood Soul Temple was far too obvious. It attracted the attention of many related consciousnesses. Luonan's closed system senses, including his superior position, just happened to be able to capture all of this. He omitted the meaningless details and traced it in reverse, just like how he had sensed Mrs. Halder before. He drew a few extension lines on the outline of the Blood Soul Temple. It was like drawing auxiliary lines in a plane geometry exercise. It's a very simple assignment. Then I'll get the answer. Wandu. No, it was a set of twin figures. The Blood Soul Temple was the foundation extending outwards. The closest one was Ren Hong. Then it split. A portion involved Tian Bang and a few related people. There was another portion that extended 30 kilometers away. The aura over there was much more familiar. It was clearly Mrs. Halder and the other core members of the Blood Flame Order of Xia City. Of course, this was just physical distance. It was the result of abstraction on the mental plane. The psychic wave figures formed by these two groups of people were actually quite similar. One glance was enough to tell that they came from the same source. The situation is becoming clearer and clearer. Luonan's mind grew calmer and calmer. His train of thought began to spring up. In comparison, the Xia City branch of the Blood Flame Order passed through their time in a state of restlessness and depression in the decompression gym 30 kilometers away. Due to their understanding of the Order's techniques, they were able to roughly guess Rin Hong's methods from the feedback from the Blood Soul Temple. Mo Luan's gloomy thoughts filled the air. That traitor no longer has any misgivings. Inlu was even more urgent. She pressed her hand against her chest and faced Mrs. Halder, strongly declaring her position. Boss, let me do it. I can cut off the psychic channel. I absolutely won't let Rin Hong succeed. And then let all the believers be at a loss as to what to do? If we let them succeed, we'll lose everything. So you want to destroy all the resonators of the Blood Flame will? Destroy the foundation of the Order's existence? Mrs. Halder stared straight at Inlu, successfully making her speechless. On the other side, Jiang Yuanjun was still hopping mad. Then what should we do? Our molds were taken away by others just like that. Those shameless separatists. Traitors. Mrs. Halder turned around. She looked at the blurry and lagging projection of information. Several seconds later she spoke softly, "Let's leave first." But Jiang Yuanjun didn't hear clearly at first. Mrs. Halder changed her words. "We must first cut our losses. We must avoid a crisis that could topple us." Cut our losses? How do we cut our losses? We'll leave Xia City for now. What kind of joke is this? Jiang Yuanjun really exploded. Are you crazy? We haven't even figured out the situation yet and you want to run? Give up all these years of operation and run? There's no worse situation than the present. Mrs. Halder's tone was calm and without ripples. Old Jiang, you watched Ren Hong grow up. He's also the most outstanding talent the Order has nurtured in recent years. Don't you trust his judgment? Huh. When it comes to the way Ren Hong conducts himself, he doesn't have any weaknesses that can be used against him. Given his shrewdness and meticulousness, things like betrayal don't happen. But once they do, there must be a sufficient reason. Perhaps the other party has a closer relationship with the military. Perhaps the other party's prospects for development are broader. But in any case, there must be an enormous disparity in power between the two sides. That's why he made up his mind. Jiang Yuanjun chuckled twice. He wanted to retort that this was all conjecture, but when the words reached his mouth he suddenly felt dispirited. What Mrs. Halder said was very likely. Ren Hong's temperament was just like that. Mrs. Halder's gaze swept across everyone. Jiang Yuanjun's mind was absent-minded. Yin Li's mind was restless. Meng Chang's face was expressionless. Wu Kuei shrunk into a corner without a sound. As for Mo Luan, she didn't need to care about him. Mrs. Halder sighed softly and continued, "I believe that everyone has the resolve to sacrifice their lives for the Order. But as the first oblatum, the continuation of the orthodoxy and the preservation of our vitality will always be our #1 priority. Besides, we have 3 shepherds. As long as the foundation of the herding law doesn't change, we will always have a chance. It doesn't matter if we're in Xia City or not." Jiang Yuanjun wasn't so easily convinced. "But I agree with the first oblatum's judgment. Black smoke curled up in spirals in the void. A low and fine voice seemed to seep out from within. Luan's soul body of black smoke was decades old. He practically represented the highest combat power of the Blood Flame Order. His sudden appearance naturally attracted everyone's gazes. However, what people paid more attention to was his attitude. Luan said, "Ever since the upheaval of the Order, the First Ablatum has repeatedly proven that her line of thought is correct. She hasn't made any major mistakes to this day." No one could refute this point. The mold was a genius idea. According to the First Ablatum's common saying, she found a good project worth investing in. We invested for this and made it to a certain scale. Then competitors appeared. They directly poached people, stole products, and even used military and political power to destroy bodies. Although it's despicable, it's absolutely impossible to do it without overwhelming strength. We have no chance of victory in a direct clash. Mrs. Halder bowed slightly towards the black smoke in the room to express her thanks. But when her gaze swept across the room, she suddenly frowned. At this moment, the black smoke curled up, faintly forming the silhouette of Luan's figure. Luan's words jumped. "In terms of concrete implementation, I have a suggestion." Chapter 420. Right now, a normal investment project has been turned into a hostile takeover by the other party. However, we still hold a certain amount of shares. We can make some changes and turn it into a bet. We'll bet on the ownership of the sacrificial artifact in the future. Elder Luan. Madame Halder's eyes focused and locked onto the coiling black smoke in front of her. From her point of view, this was just a variant of Jiang Yuanzhen and Yin Li's irrational argument. "We no longer have the capital to raise the stakes." "Yes, I do. I just need a little." The shadow of the black smoke soul body pointed at itself. "I'm enough." "No." Yin Lu and Jiang Yuanzhen spoke up at the same time. Yin Lu didn't really understand what Luan meant by bet, but that didn't prevent her from understanding his resolute intentions. She pressed down hard on her chest, almost crushing her heart. "You are the Order's stabilizing force. No matter what we do, we can't let you charge ahead. You bunch of people." Jiang Yuanzhen clenched her fists and waved them as if she was fighting someone. "You're making things complicated." "Complicated? That's a dream you'll live in forever." An angry rebuke suddenly rose from the black smoke, instantly subduing everyone present. The entire room sank into silence and the atmosphere froze. After the roar, the condensed black smoke began to drift away. The figure gradually faded and Luan's voice seemed as soft as smoke. "I only have a smattering of the efficiency investment theory. But I know that without a sacrificial artifact or an extraordinary, the Blood Flame Order can't transcend the secular world. Only by following the efficiency train of thought can we continue to exist in this world and continuously accumulate power." Jiang Yuanzhen pointed at the black smoke, but in the end she retracted her arm and clenched her fists. When she opened her mouth again, her voice was hoarse. "I've never opposed it. But is the Order's sacrificial artifact and orthodox inheritance also an investment? Or can we withdraw and break even to prevent losses?" Madame Halder didn't reply. Luan actually laughed. "I don't think about this kind of problem, but you specialize in theory. You should study it further. In a sense, this is your responsibility." At this point, Luan turned his attention to Lady Halder. "Lord Officiant, I agree to retreat, but things happened too quickly. My body is still immersed in the frozen liquid and can't move. It will take some time for it to thaw." Madame Halder shook her head. "According to the relevant contingency plans, we have a complete evacuation plan. The relevant vehicle is right next to your seclusion room. It will only take 15 minutes for the transfer to be completed, and it will last for more than 7 days. By that time we had reached Tyre and settled down again. We can start now." As he spoke, a new wave of information refreshed, and the intelligence peddler took out even more valuable information. He had secretly hacked into the building's surveillance system and borrowed the surveillance camera in a corner of the underground parking lot to spy on the area in the distance. From the surveillance screen, one could see a blood-red spiritual light spurting out from the end of the dark domain, as well as a slight spatial tremor. Jiang Yuanzhen muttered, "It has already reached this level." In the next moment, it was as if he had woken up from a dream. Anger once again dominated his thoughts. He is pulling up seedlings to help them grow. If he continues to forge the blood-fire path like this, the foundation of the Blood Soul Temple will be destroyed by him. Lady Halder looked at the projection and said softly, "Perhaps he has an even better idea." "What, boss?" Yinlu felt the violent tremors coming from the mold. Combining it with the surveillance screen, she had already made a judgment. Ren Hong is forcefully transferring the priority of the shepherd. If we do not follow up, the Blood Soul Temple will be his in 20 minutes. Meng Chong, who had been standing solemnly, spoke for the first time. His voice was heavy. Ren Hong has been overdrawing on the believer's psyche power. This way, even if we want to counterattack in the future, we will not be able to gather enough psyche power for the ritual in a short period of time. Jiang Yunjin gasped. If he is ruthless enough, he will continue to make this kind of consumption, forever maintaining the first move advantage. Lord Officiant. Madame Halder didn't say a word, but without any warning she waved her arm towards where Mo Luan's black smoke soul body was. Her fingertips brushed past, and the black smoke disappeared, leaving only nothingness. Yin Lu and the others were stunned. In the next moment, Mo Luan's voice echoed in the nothingness. The basic purpose of the bet is to know all their cards. Ren Hong, Tianbang, and what else? Yin Lu suddenly came to a realization and ordered through her wristband, "Connect Elder Mo Luan to the seclusion room." A minute later, the security personnel outside sent a message, trembling with fear. It was unknown when, but the personnel in charge of daily service and security work beside Elder Mo Luan had all fainted. The relevant scene was also transmitted back at the same time. It was taken after the robot had entered the seclusion area. It could be seen that the door of the seclusion room under layers of defense was opened, and the frozen liquid pool inside was already empty. Jiang Yunjin groaned, "Blood flame above. Blood flame above." Ren Hong knelt in the protection area of the incantation. Although his spirit was excited, his physical strength was close to exhaustion. He was an outstanding blood flame priest, and he had a deep understanding of the mold and the subtle changes in the Blood Soul Temple. It is currently not normal, and its instinct to avoid danger is too strong. It is a chaotic species and should not react to the changes in its body. Tianbang's high-speed descent was about to end, and the current situation was still under control. He was in the mood to chat. "I feel that guy's intelligence is not normal." "It has no intelligence." "Is that so?" "I don't care about the conclusions of your research, but I saw that this guy attacked several times, and every time it hit the weak point. It hit the sore spot and it came and went at will. It made the well-trained deep blue walkers lose face. What kind of monster have you raced with your herding?" "It is a mold, a mold." "All right, mold." Tianbang's voice suddenly cut off, and his gaze focused on the bottom of the building. The traffic was piled up there, and because the security department had already restricted access, the underground parking lot could only be left but not entered. It was quite chaotic. And there was a person coming out of a taxi amidst the chaotic flow of people and traffic. He was dressed in very formal attire, like a white-collar worker returning to work overtime. But his pace was sluggish, and he still had the leisure to look up after coming out of the congested traffic. His gaze streaked across the glass curtain wall of Aurora Cloud City, and also across the blurred intersection of light and shadow, and the rapidly descending Tianbang. The two's gazes intersected and they saw each other's faces. The person downstairs looked to be a middle-aged man in his 50s. His figure was thin and his face was pale as if he was ill. But there was clearly a flame burning in his pupils. The flame had also left a clear mark on the mental plane. Everyone flipped the cards or flipped the table. Tianbang's eyebrows twitched, more impulsive than expected and better at finding opportunities. In just a moment of distraction, all that was left was the meaningless street scene below. The person had already entered the building and his aura was immediately concealed. Tianbang let out a breath and spoke through the public channel. "Mo Luan is here, have you prepared the plan?" He came in a taxi. The frontline command center immediately exploded, activating E-Plan, Mo Luan's body condition monitoring, codenamed Onyx Soul. Team 5, Team 6 control the underground area. Long-range attacks are the first priority. Team 5 in position. Onyx Soul in position. Onyx Soul has entered the first floor of the underground parking lot. Yin-Yang Eye System turn on. This Yin-Yang Eye System was a monitoring device that integrated many different wave detection. It did not have many methods to deal with spirit bodies, But as long as there was a physical body, the effect was still alright. Currently, what appeared on the front finger center's screen were mostly transparent human figures, representing normal people. The spirit waves emitted by the burners and ability users on their side were displayed in green light. And in this background there was a blurry red dot. Disappeared. Tianbang looked at the monitoring screen from afar and his eyelids twitched. Hey! Determined that Onyx Soul is moving at high speed. System delay. All entrances and exits have been sealed, unable to determine if Onyx Soul has entered the spirit body state. Ding. This was the electronic sound of the elevator in position. Even though they knew that the target would not take the elevator, but in this sudden situation, the tactical squad that was searching nearby instinctively turned their guns. When the elevator door opened, a pair of affectionate couples appeared. The two faces instantly became frightened. The man sat on the ground and the woman curled up and screamed. The scene was an awkward scene. Why is the elevator not locked? It's already locked, but the control system malfunctioned just now. Tianbang followed the path that Emo Luan took to enter the building and followed along. This is not strange. During Emo Luan's third war he was a mechanic soldier. This is just a joke. Also, he told us that the evacuation work was done badly. Perhaps Emo Luan did not mind using this point. This sentence Tianbang did not say it out loud. At this moment, on the first floor of the underground parking lot, the soldier in charge of the search mission stepped on an area. The touch was very subtle, very soft. Walala. The melted reinforced concrete collapsed, and there was an even more muffled sound below. A hole about 60 centimeters in diameter appeared on the floor. Did it sink from here? There seems to be more below. The tactical flashlight's beam pierced down, all the way to the third underground floor. Is this an Earth escape? The deputy in charge of the tactical deployment said with a sneer, and then confirmed, Fragrant Bait 3 is certainly his primary target. 6th underground floor, pay attention. Yes, Senior Colonel. 6th underground floor, under the blood-red spirit light, Rin Hongmu was expressionless. In the next moment his forehead touched the ground, and he used an even more focused posture to lead the process of the ceremony. The rumbling sound of the Deep Blue Walker's engine reverberated in the underground space, and the aftermath was introduced, causing dust to rustle and fall. In the darkness, Emo Luan's hand held onto a pillar, and he looked at the back of his own hand with protruding joints. The veins on the surface were exposed and there was a layer of dense sweat. Fortunately, there were no age spots and the like that commonly seen at this age. Often in the freezing liquid pool, his body's appearance was well maintained, and he was even a bit younger than his actual age. But the situation under the skin only he knew. Chapter 421. In the parking lot, there were all kinds of vehicles neatly arranged in three-dimensional frames. They were densely packed. In fact, apart from the first and sixth floors of the underground parking lot, the rest belonged to the field of mechanical automation. Only technicians and maintenance personnel could enter. The space here was narrow and the Deep Blue Walkers couldn't fully display their abilities. It was a good rest stop. Mullen really liked the smell of engine oil here. It made him feel as if he had returned to his youth. However, the psychological inertia of middle-aged and old people still existed. These young people in the army. Emo Luan's heart was on guard before he finished speaking. I've let you down, Senior. Tianbang walked out from behind a pillar at the back. His shadow covered nearly his entire body. Only his pupils were bright like burning flames. No matter when or what group, the individuals are always uneven. Heh. Emo Luan sighed and continued walking forward. We should be able to reach the 6th floor. Tianbang unhurriedly followed. There's nothing bad about this. Senior only used 4 floors to adapt to this body that hasn't been used for a long time. The rest is probably just to save strength. As he walked past the place where Emo Luan had previously stood, Tianbang jumped up and touched the ceiling with his fingertips. His tentacles didn't change at all. This made him even more certain of his judgment. This is the legendary Black Soul body, right? Using the Black Smoke Soul body to wrap around the corporeal body and form a special form that intervenes the mental and material planes. Unfortunately, the consumption is too great. This is an ability prepared for extraordinaries. If it was 10 years earlier, if there wasn't any hesitation, if there wasn't internal strife, the voices of the two overlapped to a large extent, but in the end they were completely different. They stopped at the same time. The straight-line distance between leather shoes and sneakers didn't exceed 10 meters. Tianbang smiled in the shadows and met Imo Luan's serious face after he turned around. Approximately 2 seconds later, the corner of Tianbang's lips continued to split open, revealing a few white teeth. Perhaps I should change my way of thinking. Senior, have you never thought that according to your current realm, if you had a powerful energy furnace that could provide you with an unending stream of strength? His voice was cut off. What cut off his words was Imo Luan's gloomy and ice-cold gaze. However, a gaze couldn't kill, at least it was ineffective against Tianbang. He quickly raised his hand with a rich and subtle expression. I'm sorry. My natural disposition is frank. I've always felt that it was a pity that you chose a side in the past. If we followed the binding method, perhaps everyone would have opened up a new path a long time ago, instead of struggling for an ethereal possibility like now. Oh, the Tai Control faction. Back when the factions split, your voices were quite loud. It's bigger now. In the outer region, when Tianbang and Imo Luan were talking, they didn't stop for even a moment. The frontline command center dispatched the 2 teams of deep blue walkers responsible for the underground region to urgently shift their defenses. They set up instruments and weapons and completely sealed off the entire underground parking lot. As for the resulting chaos, well, an earthquake was a good reason. The emergency evacuation of the building had begun, but to send all the civilians to safety in just a few minutes was still a difficult task that could not be completed. But this did not prevent Tianbang from making a conclusion. The current faction of restraint is no longer the same as before. The so-called orthodoxy now is also very different from the past. Senior, you're doing something meaningless and the chances of success are close to 0. The distance of 10 meters between Tianbang and Imo Luan seemed to be 1. But in fact, it was only covered with a layer of dark curtain. The inside was divided by layers of steel frames, vehicles and pillars. It was cramped and oppressive. In addition to Imo Luan and Tianbang's confrontational aura, not even a bug could probe inside. It's about to explode. Luo Nan had placed most of his energy here on the mental plane. From his perspective, the result here was even more important than the change in the Blood Soul Temple. Cat Eyes was still performing her duties as a broadcaster. She synchronized the scene from the command center to the mission window on the psychic wave network. Aside from the shared video, the window was completely blank. Everyone was already unable to discuss. The atmosphere grew more and more oppressive. It was just as Luo Nan had determined. It could explode at any moment. On the other hand, Ren Hong's eyelids were still drooping. He was chanting a secret incantation and maintaining the ritual. He was racing against time. But was he really not paying attention? That might not be the case. Heh, I'm very grateful that you didn't directly judge me as the loser. Imo Luan spat out truly meaningless words from his mouth. He felt that there was no need to continue like this. He unbuttoned his formal suit and loosened his cuffs. He stretched out his arms a few times. I have a general idea. Oh. Allow me to release a map cannon. The greatest problem of today's youngsters, or perhaps I should say the generations after the war, is that they believe they control everything. They don't understand fear. He took off his shirt as he spat out the last word. His sleeves fluttered, and the fluttering shadow instantly transformed into a black mist that was even denser than the current environment. It spread out like a black cloud, assaulting everyone's faces. Cliché. Nothing new. This was Tianbang's evaluation of Imo Luan's speech. He crossed his arms in front of his chest. He didn't make any obvious movements. He just tilted his head, wanting to bypass the range of the black mist. But all he saw was that the black mist and black clouds had already filled the parking lot on the 5th floor. The steel frame and the car body made strange hissing noises. As for Imo Luan himself, he had already disappeared without a trace. 5th team, 6th team in position. Reactivate the Yin Yang Eye. Senior Colonel Meng Tu led 2 small teams of deep blue walkers into the underground parking lot on the 6th floor. He was Tianbang's assistant in the Special Forces Brigade. He was responsible for commanding the enemy. Right now, Tianbang had no intention of giving orders, so he continued to carry out his duties. From Meng Tu's perspective, Tianbang was keeping watch on the 5th floor. It was impossible for the attacking Imo Luan to perfectly conceal his aura. Moreover, this person definitely had Ren Hong as his primary target. Got him. The facts proved his judgment. The yin-yang eye was in full effect. It locked onto the general range of the target and connected to the fire control system. It allowed the two teams of 15 deep blue walkers to form a network of long-range weapons ready to fire. But the opening shot was still Meng Tu's favorite weapon. Prepare the format cannon. 5th and 6th team coordinate. 4th team reserve. Coordinate level 1 level 2. Meng Tu placed the barrel that looked like a rocket launcher on his shoulder. The format fire burned fiercely behind his body. He relied on his outstanding perception and control ability to coordinate the formatting power of a dozen companions. Then he concentrated and amplified it through the special barrel on his shoulder. Receive the iron fist of justice. Meng Tu continued to open the way with cold jokes, but he was extremely serious. He had been teased by Mo Lun just now. Now he was going to take revenge. The muzzle of the cannon sprayed out with a flash, forming a conical beam of light as it left the chamber. The front of the cannon rapidly expanded, while the edges pulsed with a blazing white flame. The beam of light instantly broke through the ceiling in front of him, covering an area of nearly 100 square meters. It completely engulfed the target determined by the yin-yang eye system. Over 100 streaks of flames erupted from the floor of the 5th floor of the parking lot. They collided with the pervasive black mist and immediately detonated a powerful shockwave, warping the vehicles and steel frames above. It caused over 100 steel constructs to deform and disintegrate, sending car parts flying in all directions. Luonan also noticed the great eruption of the format of fire from the depths of the mental plane. The property management company will cry. Tianbang stood at the edge of the format of fire in sync with him. The flames practically licked his face. He just grinned and shook his head. The government's trust in us is pretty much finished. Meng Tu was disinclined to respond. From his perspective, the bombardment of the ceiling had already warped and deformed. Flames seeped through, forming a vast space covered and controlled by the format of fire. The so-called revenge wasn't his goal. What he truly wanted to do was to project out the highly coordinated and resonant format of fire. He wanted to form a unique domain that could melt away all supernatural abilities. Within this domain, any body was of no use. As long as one wasn't an extraordinary, they would be forcefully pulled down from the mysterious and bizarre plane and returned to the real ordinary world. Maintain resonance. Meng Tu emphasized and encouraged his subordinates once more. Everyone's formats must resonate. Perhaps our individual combat strength is lacking, but as long as we maintain this state, all ability users will flee at the mere sight of us. Pointing forward, Cat Eyes raised an eyebrow. He's a standard chauvinist. Can I sue him for discrimination? Zhu Ling just pretended not to hear. On the other hand, Luo Nan was somewhat vigilant. From his perspective, Tianbang's deputy had fired the format of fire through the coordinated resonance of over a dozen burners. The format of fire had practically burned through all of the curtains of the shallow zone and the middle zone of the mental plane. The area involved in its attack and defense was vast and tight like never before. If the format of fire was raised by 1 or 2 levels, it would touch upon the deep zone or even the abyss zone or the polar domain. Mentally enhanced ability users would certainly be unable to avoid it. They could only meet force with force. To wrestle with a dozen or even a few dozen burners, that would truly be courting death. He absolutely had to be careful of this move in the future. He couldn't control his own ability and play with fire. Luo Nen nearly missed a crucial detail in his momentary daze. Tianbang, who was the closest, was the first to discover that something was wrong. His gaze swept across the floor of the 5th floor, and he saw that it was greatly warped and cracked. The cracks had already affected the steel frame that supported it, making strange creaking noises. The sound was so ominous that it caused Meng Tu, who was on the 6th floor, to raise his head in astonishment. It didn't make sense. The format of fire mainly ablated the mental plane. The initial explosive power had collided with Mo Luan's black mist at the juncture of the mental and the material plane, forming a shockwave. The intensity was far from enough to destroy the main structure of the underground parking lot. But now, sparks and electric currents weaved through the floor between the 5th and 6th floors. Glaring cracks appeared one after another, and they were no longer just in the area covered by the format of fire. They were rapidly spreading throughout the entire floor. This momentum. Level 1 cave in response. Just as the command appeared in the tactical channel, a large piece of the floor came crashing down along with the steel bars. The rumble exploded and the lights dimmed for a time. Rubble rained down like rain. What was even more terrifying was that several ton-heavy vehicles and steel frames came crashing down. The enormous impact seemed to cause the entire building to sway. It even brought along large pieces of the floor to come crashing down. Came crashing down like the sky was collapsing and the earth was caving in. It was as if doomsday had arrived. There were 3 squads of deep blue walkers on the 6th floor, and nearly 20 exoskeleton armors. Every single one of them was proficient in joint attacks. But when faced with the collapsing floor, any joint attacks were useless. Chapter 422. This was far too exaggerated. Luonan couldn't help but switch to a perspective that was closer to the material plane. He wanted to experience the grand scene of the entire floor collapsing. The originally stable structure collapsed in an instant. Hundreds and thousands of tons of heavy objects poured down in torrents, practically erasing all living space. Such a scene was quite shocking. He instinctively thought, 20 little deep blue walkers in that Renhong. They weren't all crushed to death, right? Oof. It doesn't seem that easy. An explosive rumble shook the 10-ton steel frame and the fixed body of the car were sent flying. Deep Blue Walkers Team 4, who were responsible for the protection mission, appeared with Renhong in the center, covered in dirt and grime. The 6 Deep Blue Walkers were able to maximize the use of their exoskeletons in the critical moment just now. They also borrowed the large falling steel frame to prop up a safe space. Such an astute and effective response was worthy of applause and praise. However, 2 Deep Blue Walkers of Team 4 fell to the ground in a short few seconds. Their auras rapidly weakened. The frontline command center received a message at the same time. Strong 3 and Strong 5 of Team 4 have been injected with Thunderfire. Requesting the use of inhibitors. Permission to immediately use inhibitors. Privileges have been unlocked. Injection complete. Medics will arrive in 45 seconds. Please open up the passageway ahead of time. Let's not talk about the price and chaos on this side. The blood-red light still existed in the center of Team 4's defense. However, the light swayed and scattered. Blood overflowed from the corner of Renhong's mouth and nose. His scalp was smashed and blood flowed down his forehead. He was in an extremely sorry state. It was clear that in order to protect this source of spiritual light, he had paid a heavy price. Renhong wasn't as calm and collected as before under these circumstances. He didn't care about his injuries at all. He just spread open his arms and did his best to gather the light. At the same time he roared in a low voice, "Give me time. I need time." Tianbang was already pouncing toward Nagua before Renhong's roar could ring out. He also believed that Renhong would be Mo Luan's first target. Not to mention anything else, just the destruction of the Shepherd's Privilege transfer ceremony was a tangible result for the Blood Flame Orthodox faction. However, Tianbang didn't expect that Mo Luan would actually play with such a large hand. He directly caused a floor of the underground parking lot to collapse. He relied on weight and gravity to stun the 3 well-trained Deep Blue Walkers on the spot. As expected, this kind of veteran was the most troublesome. Before Meng Tu and the others could regroup, Tianbang had to fulfill his responsibility as the chief powerhouse and commander and build a temporary line of defense for Renhong. In the time it took to think, Tianbang had already crossed a pile of steel ruins and approached the 4th defense line. He was about to enter it, but he felt an inexplicable chill in his heart. He didn't need to turn his head to know that there was black smoke and fire burning behind him. Mo Luan, who had disappeared at the beginning of the collapse of the building, seemed to have appeared out of thin air from the darkness of nothingness. "When did you get to the back?" The meaningless and distracting thoughts were washed away in a flash. Tianbang didn't make a sound and still didn't turn his head. Only the format of fire burst forth from his body. Fiery smoke surged straight into the depths of the spiritual plane, suppressing the tangible and intangible impact from the other side. On the material plane, the flames and the black fog collided and intertwined on a distorted surface. A large cloud of dust rose from the ruins. Then the shockwave from the collision came. A strangle-like spirit wave tornado rose and cut the nearby steel frames and vehicle frames into pieces. At this moment, the destructive power of the 2 B+ rank powerhouses was clearly displayed. The splashing fragments of the aftermath were also quite troublesome. Each fragment was comparable to a large-caliber rifle bullet. Even though they wore exoskeleton armor, they didn't dare to take a few hits. Team 5 and Team 6, who were attempting to encircle and regroup, were forced away once more. The unluckiest was still Team 4. They were practically at the center of the explosion, and they had to take care of Ren Hong and the 2 wounded. The remaining 4 could only mobilize the format of fire with all their might and pull large stone slabs to use as temporary shields. They built a broken fort. Their reactions were already at their limits. The aftermath of the storm swept through several hundred square meters of space in the ruins at practically the same time. A few deep blue walkers gritted their teeth and withstood the whistling sound wave. Yet another person was struck by successive fragments. He was unlucky enough to be hit in a weak spot on his outer bones. The format of fire was unable to effectively defend against it, and he immediately collapsed with a spray of blood. Ren Hong spat out another mouthful of blood behind the barrier that was leaking air and sand. The spiritual light that gushed out from the ground was abnormal. It was like pouring oil onto a fire. The dazzling radiance burst forth in an instant, nearly engulfing him. Even his priest robes began to burn without fire. Luonen felt like he was watching a large-scale New Year's Eve fireworks show right now. He couldn't help but want to find someone to talk to. It's truly spectacular. Cat Eyes looked at the chaotic scene in the frontline command center. She didn't respond. She maintained her restrained silence. Luonen didn't really want to hear her answer. The changes to the Blood Soul Temple were still ongoing. The embryonic form of the altar could already be seen on the peak of the mountain. Ren Hong was using intense methods to forcefully push the Blood Soul Temple into the final few hundred steps of the path of blood and fire. He was also seizing the authority of the number 1 shepherd. He was worthy of attention. However, Luonan was gradually getting used to the perspective of the system. Ren Hong's efforts were far from being able to pierce through the clear sky above the Blood Soul Temple. Most of its significance was erased. In comparison, it was more meaningful to project the twin diagrams, namely the conflict between the orthodox faction of Blood Flame sect and the restraining faction. But even so, this was no longer the crucial segment. The 2B+ rank experts had already forcefully shifted the center of the whirlpool of conflict away from the instant Mo Luan and Tian Bang fought. After all, this was a world where strength spoke. Yes, this was a world determined by cognition. Luo Nan attentively watched the 2 experts collide. He quietly waited for the inevitable moment. The shockwave covered several hundred square meters, raising a large expanse of smoke and mist. The majority of lighting equipment had already been lost in the ruins of the 5th and 6th floors. The darkness and the dust made it impossible to see anything clearly. However, the 2 combatants no longer needed the guidance of light. They had already locked onto each other's energies and were colliding with each other on the mental plane. They had lost any information, but it was impossible for them to lose the existence of the other. Tian Bang was a bit distracted. He quickly glanced at the brightest source of light in the ruins before him. It was the psychic glow of Ren Hong's believers. But in this instant of distraction, a terrifying wind pressure brought a sense of danger and smashed over. It was the wreckage of a car that flew through the air at high speeds. Tian Bang didn't dodge. He raised his elbow and waved his arm, sending the wreckage of the car, which was wrapped in terrifying kinetic energy, flying away. The wreckage smashed into the unsteady mountain of ruins a dozen meters away. "Senior, you're too reckless." "Really? I thought I would be the one to say those words." Mo Luan's figure was hidden. He was like a ghost. It was impossible to tell if he was mentally or physically. The black smoke and flames possessed astonishing corrosiveness. Even Tian Bang, a cyborg life form, didn't dare to directly touch them. Tian Bang exhaled and shouted. The format of fire erected a high wall. Black smoke burned within the screen of fire that sprayed out. Yet Mo Luan's indistinct face appeared. He smiled at Su Yongyi and then vanished. Fighting and running wasn't an option. Tian Bang's figure instantly changed from moving backwards to pouncing forward without any delay. However, an astonishing rumble and tremor rang out once more. An enormous steel frame and car came pouring down from the ruins a second time. This might not be the 5th floor stock. The 3 floors above the underground parking lot weren't looking good either. This underground space was done for. Tian Bang came to a halt. He deeply felt that tonight's situation was getting bigger and bigger. Moreover, it had already exceeded the scope of all his plans. It was sliding in the most uncontrollable direction. At the frontline command center, the person in charge of the government's security department, who had always been willing to play a supporting role, couldn't sit still. After receiving a few calls, he couldn't help but loudly warn, "Major General Tian, this is Cloud City Water Village. It's a flourishing area where over 100,000 people reside. I repeat, this is a metropolis, not the wilderness." The continuous large-scale upheavals definitely couldn't be concealed. In particular, the underground parking lot was sealed off and there were sounds of the entire floor collapsing. Even the earthquake station had to make an announcement. Although they had followed the form of an earthquake warning earlier and carried out an evacuation, the contradictory elements were not so easy to explain. If this situation continued to develop, it would clearly be another Frost River reality terrorist attack. And this time the main character was the military. The person in charge of the security department slammed the table with a bang. Tian Bang was also in a bad mood. "You're trying to throw the blame at this time." Mo Luan's mocking face flashed faintly in the darkness. Another round of cannon shots came. "That's why I said that the most fatal weakness of the post-war generations is that they take things for granted." Tian Bang curled his lips. "Last time you said they don't understand reverence." The meaning is similar, right? Senior, do you really need to play such a big game?" Separated by the steel frame and the rubble, the two began to chat. In fact, they both had their own misgivings. They were pondering over the other's strong points and weak points in order to quickly accomplish something. Right now, the distance between the two was not far. It was about the same as when they first met. They were both around 10 meters apart. Mo Luan was sitting on a piece of rubble. His back was half bent and his elbows were resting on his knees. He seemed a bit tired, but he also seemed calm and composed. He was like many old soldiers. He began to brag about his military accomplishments in his free time and gave pointers to the younger generation. The most ruthless part of war is street fighting. In the three wars, the red-eyed enemy soldiers and the mutants that wreak havoc don't care if you're in a bustling city. Destruction and slaughter are the first things that everyone adapts to. How many of the metropolises of the world are left from before the war? Haven't they all turned into ruins? How far have we gotten? Destruction was what these old soldiers were most proficient at. Mo Luan didn't mind emphasizing this point and adding a bit more pressure to Tian Bang. There was a smile on his face. One of his eyes was tranquil and the other was callous. "Young man, look at more of the video material from the past. There's nothing bad about it." Tian Bang also smiled. "Understood, senior. But allow me to show some concern. It seems like you're 2 kilograms lighter." Tian Bang extended 2 fingers. He didn't care if Mo Luan could see them in the darkness or through the rubble. "Senior, compared to a minute and 40 seconds ago, you're 2 kilograms lighter. It's normal to lose weight in high-intensity battles, but this extent is too great." And then, Chapter 423. Facing Tian Bang's question, Mo Luan patted off the dust on his shoulder and answered, "If your weight is lower than 40 kilograms, you can more or less help me collect my corpse. But it doesn't matter, there are definitely people who are in a worse mood." As soon as he finished speaking, he roared, "Mo Luan." The voice came from Ren Hong. Behind the temporary fortress, the priest who had betrayed the control faction smashed his fists heavily on the ground, smashing the already cracked ground into pieces. However, the spiritual light that was burning like a bonfire in front of him turned into smoke, and there was no follow-up. Tian Bang was fine, but his deputy Meng Tu, who was rushing over, felt as if his head had been hit by an invisible hammer. The ritual was destroyed. Under Mo Luan's body was a relatively flat front cover of a vehicle. It was just that there was a slight incline and it was leaning forward. This made him bend his body even more. The ceremony requires attitude and the result is a race against time. That's it. It's still early. Ren Hong's hoarse voice echoed in the ruins. It's not over yet. Mo Luan exhaled and faced the steel frame ruins in front of him. He laughed softly and said, "Yeah, you're actually a shepherd. But the nourishment you've secretly collected all these years has already been poured into it. I am willing to sacrifice for the Blood Soul Temple." Ren Hong's breathing became more rapid. He raised his hoarse voice. "As long as the Blood Soul Temple is here and I am here, I have not failed. I am the true defender of the Blood Flame will." Mo Luan shook his head. "As long as life exists, the Blood Flame will exist. It never needs to be defended." What we need to defend are the laws and wisdom that we communicate with the blood flame will. Emolun, are you preaching doctrines to me? All these years, you've been hypnotizing yourself to kneel and lick that woman's toes. You old fool, you're just a mascot used by that businesswoman to preserve her value. You're no different from Jiang Yuan. Is that so? Then let me remind you, Jiang Yuanzhen can be considered your adoptive father. That's right, but that doesn't change the fact that he's that woman's mascot. In that woman's eyes, there is only a return on investment. The teachings and the followers are all tools that can be replaced at any time. Now it's your turn. I'm more proactive than you think. He ended the conversation with one sentence. At this time, the tactical flashlight beams swept across the ruins, revealing Luan's vague figure. Luan did not dodge, facing the light and raising 3 fingers. Today I have a total of 3 goals. To look at my cards, to stop my losses, and to turn the tables. I'm too old to think too much. I can give myself 100 points for completing any one of them. I'm already considering the possibility of exceeding the quota. The beam of light occasionally swept across his face, catching a rare smile on his usually stern face. Through the gap between the steel frame and the car, Tianbang saw the scene and stared at it. 3 seconds later he looked away and looked. And Lin Tianlun Jing's. His gaze pierced through the darkness, and he saw that the outer layer of his hoodie and the inner layer of his t-shirt had been charred black. Tianbang's hands and feet didn't move, but the format of fire flickered and trembled. These few areas were thoroughly incinerated, revealing small damaged holes all the way to his pectoral muscles. One could see that there was a slight scorch mark on his skin, and no matter how the format of fire shook, it couldn't be removed. Tianluan had indeed been injured by the Black Soul Body's attack. In that instant confrontation, Luan was as illusory as a ghost, but the killing intent that had reached his chest was real. It was only a few centimeters away from his heart. Look at cards, stop losses, turn the tables. You said you only needed to complete one, but in reality you're quite greedy, senior. No, I'm going to puke if you keep being so hypocritical. Therefore, Tianbang patted his chest and grinned at the other side of the ruins. Old soldier, you're so annoying. Before his voice even fell, a beam of light radiated. Luan's pupils slightly contracted. The intertwining tactical flashlight beam was unable to affect his perception, but separated by the thick steel frame and the body of the car, the sudden burst of intense flame light pierced straight into his eyes. The chaotically piled ruins in front of him seemed to distort in the intense light. Oh, it was truly distorting. Like so, thousands of light beams tore through all obstructions within 10 meters of space. Like a sun exploding in a black prison, the blazing and chaotic radiance poured out in torrents. The ruins beneath everyone's feet undulated like waves. Every tiny pore was flooded with intense light. The tens of thousands of square meters of ruins were as bright as day for a time. It had been a long time since Luan's eyes had felt sore, but now he instinctively half-closed his eyelids. His black soul body also twisted the boundary between spirit and matter with all its might, weakening the instantaneous burst of intense light as much as possible. At this moment, a strange chi-chi sound scattered through the ruins. The black smoke wrapped around his body flowed out at the same time, including his aura that had always been united as one. This obliterating power and the domain constructed by the format of fire had been famous for a long time. Format domain. Legend had it that the ability closest to extraordinary was able to reformat almost all extraordinary powers. Under normal circumstances, 5 to 7 tactical teams of deep blue walkers were often required to join hands in order to achieve this. Tianbang had used his own strength to complete the setup. He hadn't even worn an exoskeleton armor. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to judge his strength as AB+ rank. The opponent has revealed his cards. Luan tried to turn his body into nothingness again in order to avoid the frontal assault. In the past he could change in the blink of an eye. But now, under the cover of the format domain, the operation of his black soul body was also affected. There was a clear stagnation. Forcefully changing would only lead to unpredictable consequences. With a thought, Luan formed a seal with his arms, covering the vital parts of his face and chest. He assumed the most thorough defensive posture. This was the judgment made by his 50 years of fighting instincts. His beating heart and boiling blood were already enough to prove that a crisis was imminent. He didn't need any more reasons. In the next moment, Tian Bang's undisguised malevolent eyes appeared in Mo Luan's blurry vision. He pounced. Just like in the last round of confrontation, Mo Luan had gotten close to Tian Bang. Tian Bang had now instantly pulled the distance between him and Mo Luan to nothingness. He was too close. What was completely different from the last time was that Mo Luan's black soul body was severely restricted under the cover of the format domain. He had to first forcefully distort and destroy the domain's effect before he could erupt. No matter how hard his fist was, it would lose its impact force after passing through a dozen or so layers of sponge cushions. Fortunately, after Tian Bang had set up the format domain, he had also cut off the possibility of using his extraordinary strength. Moreover, he wasn't wearing any armor, so he didn't need to care about the corresponding sophisticated weapons. He could only rely on his fists to do the talking. Mo Luan had completely given up on the idea of projecting his internal energy. He was prepared to use his old bones in conjunction with his well-honed skills to block Tian Bang's body of steel. But at this moment, a high temperature that could burn the soul pounced on him. It burned away the thin black mist on the surface of his body and penetrated his flesh and bones. Moreover, fire and smoke surged up on the mental plane and instantly turned into an exploding cloud of smoke. For a moment, whether it was his mental senses or his eyes, everything was covered by a monstrous bloody light. Immediately after, an expanding claw occupied his entire field of vision and smashed towards his face. Mo Luan heard a tide-like roar. Blood, blood, blood. Chapter 424. In Mo Luan's perception, the oncoming giant claw seemed to seize all the air between his nose and mouth. The cloud of flames and smoke on the mental plane even more so drowned out his subtle perception of the surrounding area. At this very moment, Mo Luan had already lost the initiative. His six senses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body and will, were completely restricted and affected by the opponent. Therefore, when he heard that deafening howl, he felt the entire skyscraper tremble. Stone slabs and steel frames continued to tumble down from above the twisted ruins, as if they could bring about an even more complete collapse at any time. But all of this couldn't compare to the brilliant flower of blood and fire blossoming within the formatting domain that radiated radiance in all directions. Blood flame, willpower. This thought was like lightning followed by a thunderous sound like a chariot being run over. It really was run over. The power that instantly surged over was as familiar as Mo Luan's own breathing, but that kind of tyrannical rejection and erosion was like the most thorough rejection, isolating him outside of the domain that should have belonged to him. That was really against the rules. Mo Luan was somewhat inexplicably moved. Right now his arms were crossed in front of him, already assuming the most complete defensive stance. But when the claw smashed down on his face, his arm bones were like two charcoal rods that had already been burnt through, snapping with a crisp sound. Whether it was the black soul body that could shift through the void or his well-tempered technique, all of it had become a meaningless joke. And Tian Bang's claw, which still had 99% of its strength remaining, directly pressed down on his head. In a blur, Mo Luan's line of sight faintly penetrated the spread fingers, once again seeing Tian Bang's malevolent and violent features. A tyrannical willpower pierced straight into his brain. Die. It was as if a high-energy bomb had exploded in the air. The ruins, which had already been chaotic to the extreme, collapsed a second time under the powerful light of the format of fire. Enormous amounts of stone and steel fragments shot backwards in a circular arc, suddenly setting off a storm of death. Danger! His deputy, Senior Colonel Meng Tu, practically fell forward like a hungry dog scrambling for shit. The members of the combat squad that had gathered over were doing the same. Their method was extremely correct. Otherwise, the high-speed flying fragments could penetrate their exoskeleton armors in an instant, tearing their bodies to pieces. The commanding officer, who was filled with killing intent, would not shed a single tear for such an unlucky person. After the terrifying eruption, the glaring luminosity within the ruins began to decrease. Most people would still see dusky darkness before their eyes at this time, but the deep blue walkers had powerful physiques and the tactical helmets to filter the light. They quickly adapted to the ambient light and saw the layer of black mist within the light waves. Ren Hong was almost blinded by the glaring light earlier. He instinctively closed his eyes and even reached out to block it. Right now he was barely able to lift his eyelids and couldn't help but tear up. He was in an extremely sorry state. But he couldn't care less about this. He stared blankly at the ruins that were nearly 100 square meters in front of him. It was only after a long while that his mind finally worked. Mo Luan Meng Tu reacted quickly. He contacted the frontline command center. Target Onyx Soul, confirm death. For a short period of time no one answered him. At the frontline command center, Cat Eyes, Zhu Ling, the technical personnel, and even the government security personnel were all stunned on the spot. The room was deathly silent. The vast majority of them weren't ability users or burners. No matter how experienced they were, when faced with the most straightforward form of extraordinary power, they had to spend time to mend the enormous cracks in their common sense, and the gap in their hearts. As for people like Cat Eyes and Zhu Ling, they had to express reverence towards the scene before them. But the instigator of all this, Tian Bang, slightly reduced the area covered by his formatting domain. He said, "Don't do meaningless things." Meng Tu was slightly startled, but he soon saw that a mass of rolling black smoke was rapidly gathering in front of Tian Bang. And in the gaps between the smoke and smoke, a blood-colored glow seeped out. The black smoke and bloody light constructed Mo Luan's silhouette in 1 or 2 breaths of time. Then this founding elder of the Blood Flame Order stretched out his body from the void and nimbly landed on the ground. He was about 7 or 8 meters away from Tian Bang, much closer than before. Compared to the beginning, it seemed that only the clothes on his body had become tattered. He actually dodged that attack just now? Meng Tu felt that this result was even more difficult to accept than the super-destructive power Tian Bang had displayed. Previously he clearly saw Tian Bang's claw, strengthened by the will of the blood flame, strike Mo Luan's face solidly. Tian Bang wasn't surprised. He stood very casually. For the sake of comfort he even stuffed his hands into his pockets. He was like a pretentious celebrity or a shoddy and low-quality ruffian. He grinned and said, "I flipped the cards. Right now it's 200%, right? Hey, you can say that." Mo Luan slightly curled up his 10 fingers and exercised his elbow and wrist joints. The arm bones that were shattered during the collision were magically restored, but his complexion was even paler. Even as he stood, his body trembled slightly. Only his smile could be considered relaxed. But for someone as solemn as him, a smile was a kind of abnormality. Ever since the 100% began he had always been this abnormal. However, he still looked at Tian Bang with extreme seriousness. "It seems to be an amazing invention." "Yeah, but I didn't scare you. It's really boring." "Who said that? If I still had a heart it would have broken my throat and flown out by now." "That's true." Tian Bang took his hands out of his pockets and assumed an offensive stance. This was the first time tonight that he had been so formal. "I was going to ask you how much weight you lost, but now I don't have to think about it." What did he mean? The people who were paying attention to this battle had similar suspicions long ago. But the society had the advantage of having a secretary with extremely outstanding insight and knowledge to interpret the situation. Mr. Mo Luan used the Black Soul Body technique to completely ignite his fleshly body and undergo an irreversible power catalysis. In a sense he's already dead. What's left in the world now is only his shadow and will. That's a lie. Just like that. If he doesn't do that he doesn't have any chance of defeating Tian Bang, a super burner that is infinitely close to becoming an extraordinary. The communication at the mission window had yet to end. The radiance of the formatting domain had already spread out once more. Compared to the previous eruption, its radiance was much dimmer. However, the radiance was restrained and condensed to the point of substance. It was relaxed and at will. Just this pinnacle of control caused all the burners present to be willing to offer up their knees in exchange for a moment of possession. And this was only a part of it. At the same time that the formatting domain spread out, Tian Bang's exposed skin was covered in a layer of bloody flames. The scorching and burning flames leaped endlessly, as if they were spurting out from the pores of his entire body. Chapter 425. Whoosh. Luo Nan suddenly jolted up from his bed. He had just taken a shower, but his body was already covered in a thin layer of sweat. This was the result of being startled. Cat Eyes and the human-faced arachnid's clairvoyance perspective clearly displayed the scene within the ruins. At this moment the world with Tian Bang at its core was clearly divided into 3 layers by the blood flames and the format of fire. The 3 layers appeared to be separated, but a subtle unity appeared within their internal logic because of Tian Bang's existence. What supported the essence of the burner's power was undoubtedly the archetype format, the high imitation of formatting theory stolen by Yen Hong and Quantum Corporation. However, was what appeared before his eyes truly the archetype format? Luo Nan turned around, his gaze pointing at the notebook on the bedside table. The two books were together. The top layer was his black notebook, and the bottom layer was his grandfather's experimental records. He reached over and pulled out the book at the bottom. His fingertips brushed across the somewhat bulging and deformed cover. He paused for a moment and lifted the cover, revealing the classic three-layer structure of a tetrahedron, an inscribed sphere and an outer-scribed sphere. There was no light in the room, but Luo Nan's heart lantern of the eye's orifice illuminated the room. The textures and lines of the diagram were all clear. The slight pauses and bends were all vivid in his mind. Of course, there was also the 16-word formula. My heart is a prison, my heart is a furnace. My heart calls for a mirror, my heart calls for a nation. The diagram and the words were so familiar that they were engraved in his soul. But at this moment his fingertips clearly touched them, but he vaguely felt as if there was an invisible barrier between them. The mission window had become unprecedentedly lively due to the continuous intense scenes. Papercut and Shuele actively expressed their opinions, but Cat Eye's judgment was a bit more daring. It looks like he's at the extraordinary level. She didn't say which one because regardless of whether it was Tian Bang or Mo Luan, their attacks and defenses had already surpassed the limits of the architect level. At least this was how it seemed to her. Papercut was more in agreement. Mo Luan was only a hair away from becoming an extraordinary at his peak. Now that he's burning his body and soul with irreversible resolve, he might be able to touch the threshold of becoming an extraordinary. Secretary He, what do you think? He Yuan avoided the question of extraordinary and responded, Tian Bang should be even stronger. In the early days of mechanical modification, his body's modification ratio had already exceeded 60%, yet he was able to gradually grasp the power of the archetype format day after day of experimentation. He didn't even have to borrow the Dynamo Core technology. This in itself is a miracle and a breakthrough type. At this moment, everyone could see that Mo Luan, who was directly in front of Tian Bang, was truly incompatible with the red, white and black three-layer structure. Naturally, he also suffered an unprecedented rejection and strong pressure. While they were discussing, Mo Luan's skinny body seemed to have been instantly pressed into the deep sea. Under the terrifying pressure from all directions, his body twisted and deformed before collapsing. Phew! A soft exhalation sounded and it was surprisingly clear. With his aura, Mo Luan turned into a specter and appeared at Tian Bang's side. His posture was no different from before. A meaningless obsession. A person who has already entered the furnace. As he spoke, Tian Bang still maintained his attacking posture, but he didn't adjust his position according to Mo Luan's shift. He still looked ahead even though there was nothing there. As soon as he finished speaking, Mo Luan's figure disintegrated once more and shifted once more. However, as long as he was covered by the formatting domain, it would be difficult for him to maintain stability in any direction for a long time. In other words, Tian Bang's domain possessed omnidirectional control. In the end, Mo Luan returned to the front of Tian Bang, facing his attacking posture directly. It really is a domain, right? He's completely taking the initiative. Papercut was convinced by He Yuan's interpretation. He combined it with Cat Eye's judgment. Right now, is Tian Bang already an extraordinary? I don't have the qualifications to judge. He Yuan still didn't give a direct answer. At this time, a sentence was suddenly inserted into the mission window. Is the so-called super burner a breakthrough in the archetype format? The one who spoke was Luo Nan. The few people on this side of the mission window more or less knew of the complicated relationship between Luo Nan and the archetype format. The atmosphere of discussion suddenly froze. Luo Nan clearly asked He Yuan, but she didn't respond. Luo Nan continued to ask about this. What step has the research of the archetype format progressed to in the end? His telepathic thoughts passed through the psychic wave network and was mapped into the virtual mission window, allowing others to perceive it. The corresponding state of mind and will seem to penetrate space and reach a different corner of the city. This was an office that was approximately 20 square meters in size. The desks, chairs, and appliances were all modern and minimalist. The lines were sharp and bright as if a 2D design had been moved here. lacked a realistic texture. The only living existence in the office was He Yuan. Right now she was sitting quietly in an office chair. The holographic screen on her desk was constantly lit. Additionally, a projector was simultaneously projecting 4 or 5 virtual screens, representing the various affairs that were being handled. At the same time, there were figures coming and going outside the office. They provided assistance and services to the brain hub. It had only been a month since He Yuan entered this type of office mode, but she had already gradually gotten used to this rhythm. She handled 3 to 5 affairs at the same time, involving the society, government affairs, family, and other domains. She handled them with ease. But at this time she paused for a rare moment. Her gaze was blank. She was a bit tired and she felt a bit powerless. Pacifying people's hearts had never been her area of expertise. She sat quietly like this for a moment. She didn't handle any affairs on the virtual desktop, nor did she respond to Luo Nan. She just fiddled with her wristband, activating a certain function. Her pupils contracted slightly. She adjusted the light filter so that she could see a virtual interface that had just been set up in the air. Only she could see it. A tetrahedron diagram appeared on the interface. There was a translucent letter, B, revolving within it. He Yuan reached out her hand. Her palm examined the fingerprint path, body temperature, special waveband, and other information one by one. 2 seconds later, she passed through the secret identification. The next level of the page opened up and the relevant database was opened to her. Tianbang. Codename TBX. Real-time status monitoring. Soon, a virtual human figure appeared on the side of the interface. All kinds of markings pointed out the relevant data of the key parts. There were also large amounts of formulas and explanations that flowed like water. He Yuan roughly swept over the relevant entries. She muttered to herself in silence. Her wristband vibrated at this time. She received a call. After activating the invisible interface, all the calls that could come in were encrypted communications. He Yuan swept her gaze over and accepted the call. Hello, Dr. Pan. Oh, Mrs. He. I just noticed that you entered the system query page. It's a bit rare, so I came to ask. Congratulations, Dr. Pan. You've made a breakthrough in your research. Right. Tianbang is currently in Xia City. You must know that you're paying attention to him. This kid will certainly be very happy. A clear and bright laughter came from the other side. There really has been decent progress so far. This is the credit of everyone in Team B. It is also the victory of the entire research system. Yes. This is the victory of the system. Chapter 426. Dr. Pan continued to smile. Of course, if we can beat Team A, it'll be even more worth it. At the very least, we'll be able to poach a portion of Deep Blue's funds. You'll have to help me with this. I believe the Interstellar Joint Committee will make the correct judgment. Haha, that would require them to really use their brains. Alright, let's not talk about these boring things. I'm going to Xia City to see my sister and a few old friends while I'm at it. Why don't we hang out sometime? Alright. He Yuan didn't want to chat any longer. After exchanging a few polite words, she hung up and closed the invisible interface. Luonan didn't ask any more questions and no one else spoke either. The atmosphere was probably quite awkward. For the time being, she had no intention of replying. Looking at the list of matters that flowed in like a stream, He Yuan felt a rare gloominess. For the time being, she didn't want to pay any more attention. She stood up and walked to the window. The curtains sensed her presence and opened automatically. She touched the glass lightly and the sash moved to the side. This was a high-rise office area that was over 120 floors high. From here one could see the bustling night scene of the metropolis of Xia City. There were splendid and magnificent lights, but there was also a boundless darkness. Just like the autumn wind blowing in the face, it swept up the hair on the temples and rolled up the curtains. It was both refreshing and cold. Yuan stood there quietly watching the night. Luonan gazed into the distance from the window. The Nate district was to the southeast. As their contact deepened, He Yuan's understanding of Luonan was constantly renewed. His impression of an ability user rookie with special talent gradually changed to a unique character with limitless potential who was constantly walking on the edge of danger. Whether it was Luonan's personal goals, the fields he touched upon, or the connections left behind by his grandfather and father, all of them doomed him to bear enormous pressure at all times. A single misstep and he would be mercilessly crushed. Right now Luo Nan was more or less a bit muddle-headed. He Yuan would rather have him stay muddle-headed for a longer period of time. At the very least, the mood of gazing at the night sky would be slightly better. Several dozen kilometers away, Luo Nan's side of the night was tranquil. The community culture of the Nade district was relatively conservative. After 10 o'clock at night, there were very few noises in the surroundings. Most people had already fallen asleep or were preparing to sleep. As for Luo Nan, it would be very difficult for him to rest normally tonight. He Yuan still hadn't replied by the mission window. Luo Nan didn't press her any further. He just waited quietly. He leaned against the headboard and flipped the pages of his notebook. His thoughts were similar to the contents of these pages. They seemed to be constantly appearing, but there was no real meaningful information. He didn't even have the mood to pay attention to the fierce battle in the underground parking lot of Aurora Cloud City, even though it was the source of his emotions. In fact, the dim and unclear shallow consciousness had already revealed a different meaning. It was just like the mission window that had not responded. Even though he did not get a clear answer, he already had a trend. The research of the archetype format must have made great progress. This was obviously not good news for Luo Nan. As for how bad it was, Luo Nan did not know. Luo Nan closed his notebook and raised his head. What the naked eye could see was the ceiling, but his field of vision was much vaster. The battles of Aurora Cloud City had been reflected from the regions where the believers were located. The breadth of his field of vision exceeded that of practically everyone in Xia City. But at this time, it was unable to help him penetrate the barriers of space and time and clearly see the changes in the future. Closing his eyes, the darkness might be more suitable for his current mood. This kind of reaction was a little too much. Luo Nan was a bit unsure of his own thoughts, so he said that he shouldn't deceive himself in the future. His self-analysis was quite ruthless. He thought that it was because the new results of the archetype format had raised the threshold of challenge, causing him to feel fearful and uneasy. No, it shouldn't be like this. In the past, Luo Nan would have probably pondered over this by himself. But today he encountered this kind of subtle problem and his method of handling it was more frank. He didn't open his eyes again. He pressed down on his ears and sent a message to He Yuan through the hex ear. This time it was a private message. He did his best to discard the emotional overtones of the message. Do you have any concrete information on the breakthrough of the archetype format? He Yuan finally responded several seconds later. I do. It's still in a confidential state right now. I'll tell you in detail once the level drops, okay? It was a marvelous turn. He Yuan's response was a bit more emotional than usual. Luo Nan continued to ask, I just want to know the general direction and degree. It's always progressing. It's extremely fast. Really? Extremely fast? After a period of blank time, the other side suddenly asked in reply, Mr. Luo, do you have an idea of the global level research system? He Yuan continued to speak without waiting for Luo Nan to respond. A few dozen Nobel Prize-level academic authorities are leading the way. Dozens of large and medium-sized laboratories have been established in various parts of the world. They have absorbed hundreds of thousands of first-rate scientists. They have spurred hundreds of thousands of researchers. They have leveraged trillions of funds. All for the sake of a single topic, a single goal. As long as it possesses a high degree of research value, it is related to the overall situation of global development. Under this kind of model, a mistake in a certain aspect is often no longer a mistake. It is merely the result of an insignificant experiment. Similarly, being correct is only correct. It is a good beginning, but it is far from the end. The somewhat lengthy explanation was like a flowing stream of water. It washed away the bewilderment in Luo Nan's mind. Luo Nan suddenly understood a bit. He was probing and asking, then what kind of treatment should a founder receive? A basic reputation. The right to be remembered fairly by others. Don't they belong to a part of the system? Or could it be that we have been excluded from this system from the very beginning? It seemed like he was no longer ignorant. He Yuan looked calmly at the night scene outside the window, but she was unable to see the youth's face several dozen kilometers away. As for the answer, whether she said it or not, it was meaningless. Luo Nan really did understand. At the very least, he understood a considerable part of it. Capital, power, and honor were never two ends of a seesaw. They were one. It was just like the structure revealed by formatting theory. There was certainly an axis. Then everything revolved around it. That was why it was called a system. He understood the weight and exclusivity of a system very well. Luo Nan was not afraid of these things. He had confidence and he had ambition. He just needed time to expand the construction of formatting theory layer by layer. He would become an extraordinary, a system with him as the axis. And he would emerge victorious in battle. He would stand at the apex of the stars as a matter of course. However, everything needed time. Luo Nan's mind was finally clear, but it was pierced by the blade of reason. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will lose all self-righteous imaginations. He could persevere. He could work hard. But could the old man who gradually embraced death amidst his madness and loneliness wait that long? Chapter 427. Luo Nan leaned against the headboard, half sitting, half lying down. The sealed room made him a bit uncomfortable. He subconsciously opened the curtains remotely, letting the night flow in. Perhaps he could dilute his gloomy mood a bit. His wristband vibrated slightly at this time. Someone had sent him a message. It was Xie Junping. Nanster, something has happened to Aurora Cloud City. Luo Nan was disinclined to reply to this sort of rotten news. He pretended not to see it. But this was more or less a reminder. It made him understand that no matter how his mental path twisted and changed, the plane of reality would not change because of his will. Things would proceed as they should. Aurora Cloud City, including Cloud City Water Village and the large residential area, had indeed entered emergency evacuation mode. Whether they were players, tourists, or white-collar workers, they were all required to quickly leave this area. For this reason, the government had even arranged for large vehicles to assist in the evacuation. Various media outlets received the news and rushed to the scene one after another. In this context, the large number of car owners were perhaps the most sensitive group. Due to the existence of the Internet of Things, the large-scale vehicle damage caused by the collapse of the underground parking lot could not be hidden from people. The scene of tens of thousands of people on the building receiving the vehicle damage alarm was quite spectacular. The outbreak of this problem brought quite a bit of difficulty to the evacuation work. The government departments responsible for related matters such as security and public security poured out a torrent of abuse at the instigators. But so what? The underground parking lot had a 6th floor. Well, there was no meaning in talking about the floor number right now. Only the first and a small portion of the 2nd floor of the underground parking lot remained in the battle between the two B+ level powers. They barely managed to maintain their original layout. The remaining 4 floors had practically been completely turned into ruins. There was an endless stream of shattered rocks, twisted car bodies and steel frames. Following the whistling shockwaves, they sputtered and tumbled. A normal person would die beyond recognition in less than 2 seconds here. Luo Nan watched everything coldly through the dual perspectives of the Wraith Sign and Cat Eyes. Right now, Tian Bang and Mo Lun were engaged in a suffocating close-quarters attack and defense. The figures of the two were practically fused together under the high-speed attack and displacement. In the blink of an eye, dozens of exchanges of attack and defense occurred. Hands, feet, knees, elbows, shoulders, and even the visible and invisible energy released outwards were all their weapons. They rubbed and twisted together, forming a blood-red tornado of flames. Wherever their figures passed, be it stone or steel, everything was swept and ground to pieces. Such strength could be said to have completely broken away from the limits of the human body. People couldn't help but consider him as an extraordinary. Affected by this situation, Papercut finally couldn't resist breaking the silence spell of the mission window. He said, "My eyes are going blurry. Come over here, professional. Who has the advantage right now?" In terms of body techniques, Mo Lun should be more experienced and ruthless. His rhythm is smoother. Xue Lei had also held back for a long time, so he immediately responded. Xue Lei's eyesight and judgment were worthy of the name, professional. Mo Lun launched a wave of powerful attacks as soon as it was released. His unpredictable claws continuously broke through Tian Bang's defense. The first attack that broke through Tian Bang's defense almost stabbed into his eyes. In the end, it scraped open Tian Bang's brow bone and blood splashed out. This was just the beginning. Following that, Tian Bang's face, neck, chest and shoulder were hit one after another. Mo Lun's blood flames, which were even purer, clearly suppressed Tian Bang for the first time. Half of Tianbang's face was burned by the intertwining and twisting blood flames. His skin and flesh were lacerated for a time. It looked like his skull was about to be burned through. But even so, Tianbang's expression didn't have any particularly obvious changes. It made people wonder whether or not he had been completely transformed into a robot. It was very difficult for people to grasp such details by relying on monitoring equipment to observe. Luo Nan relied on the Wraith Sign's perspective to be sure. Victory and defeat were about to be decided. Luo Nan sighed. Tianbang's aura had yet to dissipate, but he suddenly roared. A storm of blood flames could be seen erupting. The powerful repulsive force forcefully swept Emo Luan away. Emo Luan's condensed black soul body showed great distortions and deformations. Then it catalyzed into smoke once more. Tianbang stared at the point where the black smoke split apart. The skin and flesh of his face that was charred by the flames twitched at a terrifying degree. In the end, it formed an extremely malevolent smile. It's not over yet. The brightness of the bright formatting domain on the outside instantly exploded off the charts, forming a glaring white light. The silhouette of Emo Luan's figure was reflected under this screen of light. The misty smoke on the outside seemed to be frozen within the light. Emo Luan's figure reappeared. His face was the same as before, but his expression was grave and serious. It surpassed any moment before. Right now, the contrast in strength between the two sides had already appeared. Emo Luan used the secret technique of Black Soul Body to ignite his body and soul. For a short period of time, his explosive strength was formidable. He also appeared unkillable. But in the end, this was a decisive method. Sooner or later, he would burn out. And Tianbang, who had the formatting domain and the support of the blood flame willpower, already had the embryonic form of an extraordinary domain. It could be said that he was in an invincible position. Therefore Tianbang, who appeared to be in a sorry state, was the one who truly held the upper hand. Luo Nan evaluated in a low voice, "It really is a good cage." The so-called formatting domain used the formatting fire to cover the material plane, as well as the shallow and middle layers of the mental plane. It used its special power of order to form a virtual cage. Emo Luan wanted to tear apart his bindings at all times to enter the depths of the mental plane and display his strong points. But he didn't succeed even once under the pressure of the formatting domain. And no matter how he seized the opportunity to attack, he was unable to deal fatal damage to Tianbang's steel-like iron body. He was even more unable to shake the erected domain. Just like this, he was unable to attack. He was unable to escape. He had already sunk into absolute passivity. Tianbang chose the most efficient, most concise and most callous method. He consumed the embers of Emo Luan's body and soul bit by bit. Emo Luan had no other path. Just like how he chose to ignite his body and soul earlier. If he didn't do this, he would have been smashed into dregs by Tianbang's fist. The difference in strength erased too many options. Emo Luan would lose all his chips in this gamble sooner or later. Victory and defeat had been decided. He couldn't drag it out any longer. Luo Nan's thoughts were clear. The Wraith Sign silently churned in the depths of the mental plane. His six-colored demon eyes locked onto the material plane, differentiating the threat level of each target one by one. Emo Luan had been tossed and turned by bloated stomach before. The order led by the Blood Soul Temple had caused a bit of an effect on its chaotic nature. However, Luo Nan's incorporeal chains were unquestionably the #1 ruler. After the clear command was issued, the berserk chaotic element suppressed the order of the Blood Soul Temple, which lacked momentum. It even interfered with the imprints left behind by the shepherds on the Blood Soul Temple.